What's up, guys? James Hill, founder and CEO of Black Millionaires. I have to make a public apology. I want to apologize to the Uncle Nearest team. I want to apologize to Fawn Weaver. I want to apologize to Keith Weaver. I want to apologize to the CFO fraudster Michael, who started all of this, because I haven't had enough smoke for this stupid lender who lent you guys all this money to begin with. If that person would have did their due diligence, we wouldn't be in this situation to start. So there's a major new development in this case with Uncle Nearest, and we're going to get all the way into it. So with the new development, this time the focus is not on the company's former CEO, Fawn Weaver, the former CFO who defrauded the company and started all of this. Um, we're not talking about them. We're not talking about the lack of leadership of Fawn Weaver's husband and all of the nonsense. We're not talking about none of that. Today, we're talking about the lender because it takes multiple people to tangle. And for the people who don't remember what's going on, as a reminder, Uncle Nearest was placed into court appointed receivership in August of 2025 after defaulting on roughly $108 million in loans, and we're going to get to how all of that money is broken down. But they received this money from Farm Credit Mid America, the idiots who started all of this. Now, the court appointed the court appointed receiver, Philip Young Jr., was appointed to oversee all of this. And earlier this summer, he recently just fired Fawn Weaver and Keith Weaver from all of their leadership positions. That broke the internet, right? Everybody was talking about that. And with everything going on, I can understand why he's doing that. But now the receiver has filed a negligence lawsuit against Farm Credit Mid America, arguing that the lender had all the information in the world and ignored multiple warning signs and red flags that the alleged fraud that the CFO was doing. They for more than a year they overlooked all of these red flags. They didn't do any type of due diligence. So according to the new lawsuit, right, Uncle Nearest, they had three different types of loans with Farm Credit Mid America. Okay, the first type of loan was a traditional loan, a term loan similar to when you go get a mortgage, 30 years, fixed payment, principal interest on the payment. Okay. The second one wasn't as complex either. It was a line of credit secured by the company's distillery. So they have this massive distillery in Nashville, secured a line of credit. Okay, the third one was like a revolving credit card, which totaled $35 million. Again, think about this revolving credit line as a business credit card, like how me and you have business credit cards, right? Okay, that's the business relationship we're going to focus on. The receiver alleges that while serving as the chief financial officer, okay, while serving as the chief financial officer, Michael Sawaski orchestrated a multi-million-dollar scheme to dramatically increase the revolving business line of credit, the revolving credit card, right? And the way he did this is orchestrated through the bankers and all the people he was working with. So according to the lawsuit, between July 2022 and August 2023, Michael repeatedly submitted falsified documents and inventory reports claiming the Uncle Nearest brand owned significantly more barrels of whiskey than they actually had on the books. And this is real important because that's how they were getting the loans from the barrels. Because those barrels served as collateral for the revolving lines of credit, the receiver says that falsifying these documents, Farm Credit relied on those And they relied on those reports. They didn't get no tax returns. They started increasing the lines of credit. Oh, you got more barrels of whiskey? Okay, good. Okay, good. So they just kept giving them more. So over a 13-month period, Farm Credit Mid-America, the lender, raised the revolving credit line or the credit card, right, from $35 million. That's what they started out with, which is huge, by the way, all the way up to approximately $66.98 million. So the receiver says Michael didn't stop there. So now that he'd increased it from $35 million to $66 million, according to the lawsuit, he submitted 28 separate drawdown requests. So that would be like going to the bank and getting a cash advance on your credit card, right? So he submitted 28 of these within a year. Roughly every 2 weeks, he was asking Farm Credit to release money under expanded credit, right? So just basically keep giving him the cash, keep giving him the cash. By the end of that period, the lawsuit says nearly $67 million have been drawn or cashed out from that account of the 68 million total. Okay. The lawsuit also says the former CFO later admitted to some of his actions during interviews with private investigators. He's getting investigated, he's getting interviewed, and he admitted that he did a lot of this stuff laughing about it, right? He needs to go to jail. So according to the receiver, right, Michael admitted to falsifying Fawn Weaver's signature on different corporate documents without her knowledge. So Fawn Weaver is the victim in this case. He did this without her knowledge, without any authorization. He also admitted to transferring some of her shares in the company, the ownership structure in the company, to himself, falsifying board meeting minutes. So you got to have board meeting minutes when you're in a corporation. But he falsified this to make it appear that Fawn Weaver and her husband Keith Weaver were in the meetings agreeing and had approved all of these loans. They never actually authorized anything. So he's telling everybody how he cooked up the scheme and started using the money. Now, here y'all go. This is how he started to use the money. He bought a home in Las Vegas. He bought multiple cars. He started gambling, spending money fast, blowing money fast, right? The receiver claims Michael, the former CFO, exploited the company's payment system as well. Now, this is where it's get really interesting. Okay, so according to the lawsuit, Fawn Weaver and her husband Keith Weaver would approve payments, legitimate payments. They have vendors, they have contractors, they have people they have to pay. Legitimate vendors through the company's payment platform. So Fawn Weaver and her husband goes through this payment platform, they approve it. After the approval, Michael, the former CFO, went back into the payment system, changed the recipient of the payments. So maybe he put himself in some cases. And then he changed the payment amount. So if they were paying $50,000 to a vendor, he changed the amount to $150 and sent it to himself. All of this money is just going out with no oversight. Nobody's looking at none of this. So when the receiver came into the company, right, the receiver job is to stabilize the company and to get all the records and bring all of that up to record. So the receiver said they thought they had approximately 345,000 vendors. $345,000 in vendors that they need to pay. After conducting a formal review of all of the books, the receiver, drumline, the receiver said they owed more than $10 million because the number of vendors that wasn't paid wasn't listed. And then when they start contacting vendors, going through everything, realizing that all the money has went to his personal account or his business account, they never the vendors never received payment. So a lot of these vendors start, hey, like we're about to sue y'all, and they were paying these people, but he switched all the payments. Okay, so the lawsuit argues that Farm Credit should have caught what was happening pending all of this. Farm Credit should have caught this because they should have did extra due diligence. They should have reached out to some other corporate executives. They should have even called Fawn Weaver. They should have called the husband. They should have did something. So according to the receiver, every one of the 28 drawdown requests that this man, Michael, the former CFO, asked for was approved. They never reached out to anybody. They approved them with only one individual signature and one individual request, and that was the former CFO, Michael. Okay, the receiver says they never contacted Fawn Weaver. They never contacted Keith Weaver. They never contacted anybody else for approval on any of these loans. No other executives. They gave this man $67 million without verifying documents, without looking at tax returns, without looking at anything other than the falsified documents from the barrels. $67 million. Also in the lawsuit, the filing specifically argues that a single phone call, a single email, a single text message to Fawn Weaver over this 13-month period would have exposed this multi-million-dollar fraud and saved everybody the millions of dollars in fraud, scam, legal fees, headaches, the brand, the whole nine. The receiver also contends that the lender gave out more than $100 million in loans without even doing any internal, like, structural review of any type of documents, any type of executive leadership, any type of board approval. They kept giving this man draw after draw after draw after draw without reviewing any financial statements, any bank records, any tax returns. All they were looking at is the success of the company and the amount of barrels that they have. So instead, according to the lawsuit, Farm Credit followed their internal policy, which is they can just give money out to anybody. They can give money out to whoever they want within 24 hours as long as they have one executive signature. That's all they need. All they need is one person to request money, and they're going to send them millions and millions of dollars. One officer, no matter how big or small the company is. This is ridiculous. I can't believe the lender allowed any of this to happen. So the receiver alleged that Farm Credit had its own financial incentive. Now, not the overall company, but the bankers involved had their own financial incentive to continue approving these transactions. So according to the lawsuit, each time the revolving credit line was modified, Farm Credit collected what lenders call a loan modification fee. So every time they switched it over the course of the 13 months, they continue to get fees and fees and fees. So the bankers who are approving this are raking in hundreds and hundreds of thousands, and it even got up over the 13 months. It allegedly got up to $400,000. So those fees encourage the lender to continue approving their request, turning a blind eye, right? Why would you do any type of due diligence if you're receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees? You're not going to question anything. You're receiving all this money. You're the banker over this loan. So the lawsuit challenges how Farm Credit could approve all of these structured loans, all of these lines of credit, all of these term loans without reviewing a single tax return. They should have rather gave these increases to the real estate line of credit the receiver is alleging. That way, the minute they defaulted on anything, they would have been able to go back to the real estate instead of relying on all of these falsified documents, because real estate is real. It's right there. You have a deed, you have a tax office, you have a lot of stuff that you can check on the value of these properties and all of that. So the lender is basically saying the real estate generally appreciates in value, while the whiskey barrels and all the other stuff that y'all really gave the loan on, it doesn't really appreciate in value, all of that like that. So while y'all use the supporting documents to continue giving these loans, really y'all never did any real proper due diligence in order to verify any of this was legitimate. So y'all have some negligence on your end. The receiver argues that Farm Credit, finally discovered that the inventory was worth substantially lower, right? That all of these documents was falsified, right? Once they finally figured this out, that's when they wanted to file this lawsuit, right? That's when they pushed Uncle Nearest into default. And then they want to start, making it seem like they were the victims in all of this. So they filed this $108 million lawsuit, painting Uncle Nearest as the worst company ever. When you look at what y'all doing, y'all the perfect relationship. Y'all are all in bed together. So based on these allegations, right, the receiver is now asking the court to hold Farm Credit Mid-America liable for their negligence. They're basically saying, hey, yeah, Uncle Nearest, leadership, Fawn Weaver, the CFO, yeah, they did some questionable things. But what about the people over at Farm Credit Mid-America? Did they do some questionable things as well? I think they did. So while they're suing, there's multiple lawsuits going on at this point. Okay, Uncle Nearest, the company, and Fawn Weaver are suing their former CFO, Michael Sawatsky. Farm Credit Mid-America is suing Fawn Weaver and Uncle Nearest for defaulting on the loan. Fawn Weaver is suing Farm Credit Mid-America for defamation, basically saying they planted these bad stories. The receiver comes in, fires Fawn Weaver and her husband. They're already investigating the former CFO. And now the receiver is suing Farm Credit Mid-America, alleging they were negligent in this situation as well. So there's a lot of finger pointing going on, but this was the bombshell that everybody was waiting on, because if you really think about it, this is kind of a win for Fawn Weaver, because yes, there's a lot of allegations that she moved money around and, she was negligent as well with her leadership. The CFO is to blame at this point. The lender is to blame at this point. To me, in the whole grand scheme of things, Fawn Weaver is the third person that y'all need to be pointing fingers at. Yes, the CFO, okay, you got to point fingers at the CFO. Then you got to look at this lender. Why would you lend somebody $108 million, $78 million, $60 million, $35 million without looking at a single tax return, without looking at a single bank statement? Nobody would ever approve of that loan. So while Fawn Weaver's lack of leadership, Keith Weaver's lack of leadership is to blame, because, again, They could have simply picked up the phone, called their lender on a random Tuesday, and they say, "Yeah, I just sent you guys another $40 million for what? $40 million? We ain't asked for no $40 million." Boom, and they could have stopped everything right there. They didn't pick up the phone. Fawn Weaver didn't pick up the phone. She was busy on Instagram selling books, doing podcasts, talking about a $1 billion brand instead of doing a company audit. She could have hired a finance intern from Wall Street. She could have hired a fresh new law firm associate. She could have hired anybody. She could have hired me. She could have hired you to look at these documents, look at bank statements, look at where money is going, and all of this would have stopped. So with this bombshell, I'm placing a lot of blame on Farm Credit as well. Yes, y'all got duped into this because of y'all lack of due diligence, but y'all are not as much of victims as y'all are trying to play and blame everybody for. Y'all are just as dumb and just as gullible as Fawn Weaver's leadership, and the person who need to be behind bars is that CFO. Where's this guy at? We keep seeing Fawn Weaver. We keep seeing headlines about her and her husband. Where's this guy, Michael Sawatsky? He needs to be behind bars immediately. Why hasn't he been arrested? What is going on? Everybody's being arrested for less, all this PPP fraud. This man did a $78 million fraud and allegedly is still walking around. So, all right, yes, I had to definitely give a public apology because I wasn't putting enough pressure on Farm Credit Mid America like I was doing for Fawn Weaver's lack of leadership, the CFO who defrauded everybody, and Keith Weaver's lack of a backbone for even holding Fawn Weaver to be accountable to review the books. You're the you're the CEO husband. What are you doing? Where are you at? Where's your leadership skills? You couldn't take a peek in, look at the financials, and like Fawn Weaver is doing her job promoting the company. What is his job? What is Fawn Weaver's husband's job? Allegedly, he's not even an employee for the company. So you couldn't take a peek and look at the finance one time? You couldn't pick up the phone one time? Thank you guys for watching. I want to make a deal with you. On my end, I'm going to produce high quality informative content for you to enjoy and learn from. And on your end, you're going to subscribe down below to the podcast. Now we have a 50-50 deal to build this independent media company together. And if you want to invest with us and ensure our success, subscribe down to the YouTube membership. It really, really helps us hire journalists, hire videographers, and do the investigative journalism and independent journalism that you love and that you learn from.